All right, welcome again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the beat and pour white lightning straight onto your brain. What are we talking about today, Samo?
Well, we're going to open this up with a little Dana White because we're going to talk testosterone
Mhm.
and manliness and masculinity and what it means. And, well, let's just get to the video straight away. This is from 60 Minutes.
Growing, we're global. We are definitely unapologetically masculine.
Can this bubble over to too much? When you hear toxic masculinity,
What's that mean?
you tell me.
No,
When
you
hear
just said it. What's the definition? How can somebody be too masculine? Is that a possibility? Can you be too masculine?
That's
tell me.
right there.
No.
You think
Okay.
so?
The answer is hell no.
Yeah, so that was perfect. We haven't referenced it in a while, but early on we talked a lot about Peterson and the interview that really blew up with Kathy something or other Newman,
Kathy
I think,
Newman. Yeah, Kathy Newman.
on the BBC. And the reason it blew up and the reason it was so good is because he never let her establish the premise, never let her make assumptions and challenged her on her definitions, which she at least had some intellectual integrity and seemed like, and from what I'd read of people afterwards, yeah, she's a corporate lefty, typical journalist, but she actually is a, a genuinely good interviewer and journalist, even if she is heavily biased. This is the, that guy right there is well, right before we started recording, you said we were talking about some of the comments we have gotten in the past that I just assumed are bots. And you made the point, well, even if they're real humans, they're bots because and that is a demonstration of that. That is why the meme was created of the corporate media and the people who parrot the corporate media narrative are NPCs,
Hmm.
just regurgitating the thing that is said. How do you make it to that point in your career as a so-called journalist and you get blown away when someone challenges you on the definition? That is so ipso facto, I don't even know how to address it of, well, what does that even mean? You tell me. Dude, you're the one who asked the question. How, no, it is incumbent on you to define that. Well, what do you mean toxic masculinity? Well, this would be that. But they are in such a opaque, small, ever shrinking bubble that they just throw out these terms and oh well, yeah, it just is.
Hmm.
There were clips going around the last couple of days of Ezra Klein, who's a Democratic operative, and is I know he's worked for some corporate media publications before as well. I think he was in the Obama administration. Anyway, he was sitting down with Ta-Nehisi Coates, who has come out from whatever rock he was hiding under, and it was hilarious.
One of the
Not
the
just
guys with three names, as Glenn Lowry would
yeah,
and John McWhorter would call them, the
not
person with
not
three names.
just the back and forth, but then people were sharing some of the comments under the interview of, as you say, the bots, and it, their inability to even, I mean, it can be difficult to articulate the other side and especially steel man the other side. That is why when you are in speech and debate, or if you are in, you know, studying the law, that is why you are required to do that. One, because you might have to, and two, you need to know what the other side is going to say if you want to rebut it in an intelligent way. These people can't even fathom that there is another side.
Hmm.
They just throw out these buzzwords and then that's just is what it is.
Well, you saying that, Ezra Klein is one, but on the right, uh, as fractured as it is right now, you got people like Candace Owens,
Oh geez.
where you watch her debate. I'm going to put scare quotes on the debate there. Uh, she's basically just saying the talking points, no matter what the question is and no matter what the rebuttal is. And usually it's someone like an Ezra Klein on the other side who's saying their talking points, no matter what the question or what the rebuttal is. And everybody on the right cheers for Candace, and everybody on the left cheers for whoever, Destiny or whatever it is, you know? And I actually blame the audience because these people are the famous rich people.
Yeah.
The people who are actually having intelligent conversations are pushed off into the background. And I think actually the corporate media wants it that way because they want the fight. So,
Well, and as you pointed out in the election, you can't go on a 2 or 3 hour long form podcast that is completely open ended and is going to have follow up questions without being exposed.
mhm.
If you are used to regurgitating the talking points, if you are used to the 5 to 10 minute cable news Sunday morning news show hits, as they're called, you are going to absolutely fall apart and look like a moron if you sit down for 2 to 3 hours. One of my favorite examples of this is even someone who is very intelligent, no matter what you think of him, Mark Zuckerberg is clearly a high IQ person.
Mhm.
Rogan walked him right into a pit, several years ago when and you saw Zuckerberg's face when he realized what he did of, oh,
Admitting that the feds were telling him what
I
to
just
say.
admitted
Yeah.
that we colluded with the feds to censor people. Oopsie. And Rogan just walked him right into that because it wasn't a talking points back and forth. It was a conversation.
Yeah, and now YouTube is admitting to it. We censored for these reasons, and they're like, "Whoopsie, everything's monetized again."
Mm-hmm.
I'm waiting for the big class action lawsuit of we're owed back pay. We are owed back pay because you censored us and you
Mm-hmm.
demonetized us, and you still made money off of us while you were doing it. And there's a dollar amount attached to that. You could
Oh yeah.
figure that out because you could have average subscribers, minutes of playtime, and what the advertisers pay. There is a way to legitimately get a number there. I am waiting for that lawsuit. Now Google can handle it because they're richer than Jesus, but it's still these kind of things need to happen because we need to see some sort of repercussion. But back to the main point.
Well,
What
getting
is
getting yeah, in order to push back against these kinds of things, you know, Charlie Kirk, we keep bringing him up because he's still in the news, and it is. I mean, I've heard a lot of people compare it to the assassination of MLK or RFK for our generation, and I think that's an apt comparison and historical analogy, and and so it is still relevant. I've said this before in other contexts and with other people as an analogy of, so you look at someone like Jocko, who has a podcast, and there's a manly man, no neck, you know, former SEAL, jiu-jitsu black belt, he's a manly man. Charlie Kirk was every bit as masculine and every bit as brave. Now, he did it differently. His arena, his fight was rhetorical, but he did not back down. And to me, that is the hallmark of what masculinity is you stand up for what you need to stand up for. You do what you need to do, even when it's hard. And when you get pushback, you don't back down. Now, Dana White may be, you know, bombastic, bombastic. He's a little bit of a carnival barker because he is trying to sell a product, but he's not wrong there to laugh off the absurdity of, okay, first of all, can you be too masculine? And secondly, what even is toxic masculinity? And why are you asking me to define it when you're the one that brought up the term? And
Mhm.
whatever the avenue that is what you need to be able to do as a man. And it doesn't have to be on the large scale,
Mhm.
but it's going to be more difficult. And this is something that's been noodling around in my brain for a while, and it kind of popped up in part of it was that Dana White interview of, here's what we should talk about today, because we have been talking about what we collectively can do, but also what we individually should be doing in order to push back, in order to right the ship, as it were. That's going to be a lot harder if you have difficulty being masculine, in the same way that we've talked about mental health a lot lately. And I've used myself as an example of anxiety and depression is difficult. It is difficult you can work through it, but it makes doing the things that you want to do and need to do much more difficult until you deal with that. Well, same thing with masculinity, is that I've had this idea noodling around in my head for a while, put on my amateur psychologist hat, and you give the actual technical answers of, I do not think you can be properly masculine without a a good degree of testosterone. You need testosterone that is healthily there in that middle range somewhere of what is considered healthy for an adult male.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't, it is going to make it that much harder to do things, because it will affect not only your physical health but your mental health.
Yes. Okay. So there's a reason why we front load our masculinity
Hmm.
as humans. Now, we'll talk about why it's a different day and age now, but we go back to our hunter-gatherer tribe days. We have examples of this in real life. Uh, why am I blanking on the name? The tribes in Ethiopia. Uh, but basically, if you are a young male, you reach adolescence and you go on raiding parties and you hunt. You hunt and you go on raiding parties until you're about 25 years old. And if you're still alive, you can have a wife, or actually multiple wives. So you go on raiding parties and you hunt, and then you can get married and have children. That is how it works. And that's how our ancestors did it for 100,000 years or more. And it takes a lot of get up and go do the thing to do that. You have to be bigger, faster, stronger, and highly motivated to be able to do those things. Because if you lack motivation, are you going to fight for anything? I mean, going back to Dana White, he runs a fight company. Obviously, these guys are pushing some testosterone, right? Because it takes that high chemical balance in your body to actually get up and fight. And we die younger because of it, but it actually motivates us to do those things. So now we talk about modern life. Well, you still got to get up and go to work. And the role of man has changed, but we haven't adapted to it yet. What we are adapted to do is protect and provide, hunt and raiding parties, protect and provide. The PP, we have a PP for a reason, because we do PP, protect and provide. And testosterone gives us the boost we need to do those two things. Now, in the modern world, we're seeing a huge decline in testosterone. They're saying 1% a year in the average teenage male or younger male. Part of it, we've got all the theories out there, BPAs, and uh, the fact that females are taking birth control at a younger age, so we're not getting that pheromone boost when we're in adolescence. Just the lack of physical activity, the obesity rates, all of these things are contributing to that.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is we don't know what to do with it internally. We don't know what to do with it internally, so we end up in depressive states. We end up unmotivated. We end up just sitting in the basement playing video games, drinking Mountain Dew, and eating Cheetos.
And this gets in much the same way that I've been talking about Martha Beck's book and her I don't remember if she came up with this phrase, or if this is in the technical literature, and a defense cascade, or leading to an anxiety spiral.
Mm-hmm.
So you get into
When
these
your mind is
ruts and it
outside
makes
of
it
your nature,
worse.
or when your life is outside of your nature, anxiety is the predetermined result of that.
And these things are going to feed off of each other and make it harder and harder and
Mhm.
harder and harder
Well, I'll say
to
anxiety and depression.
do. Yes.
Yeah.
And and so then you start to become more depressed because, oh, I'm gaining weight. Oh, I'm out of shape. And that just makes it harder to actually start doing the things to get in shape. So I pulled up here um uh natural ways to increase testosterone levels because we'll talk about testosterone therapies here in a little bit, but there are ways that you can maintain or increase healthy testosterone levels just naturally because, as you talked about, for 100,000 years, that's what we did. That's how we lived.
We have to we'll have to put an asterisk on that. But say you're a young, healthy male.
Mhm.
Say so we'll just put that asterisk on there. You're a young, healthy male. These things.
And this is from Harvard University, and they list some things that we've talked about, and they're fairly simple: weightlifting, resistance training, especially high intensity interval training, um, diet wise, uh, high protein and a good amount of healthy fats, which they specifically list avocados, nuts, olive oil, and then fatty fishes. Um, that one we don't need to go into the witchcraft, but hormone production requires fat.
Hmm.
That is a big part of what the fat in your diet is for. Is hormone production. So all of the hormones, not just testosterone.
Hmm.
Um, They also list zinc, vitamin D, which we've been harping on, um, magnesium. But then to your point about the mental effects is cortisol levels. Reduce high stress can elevate cortisol, which negatively impacts testosterone. So there you are with the negativity spiral. Again,
Hmm.
is the the high stress, the high anxiety, which just continues to increase year over year, younger and younger, and then that depletes that testosterone, which just gets you feeling worse and makes it harder to do the things to break that cycle.
Before we get too specific, although I think we might have gotten there already, disclaimer: we are not your trainers. We are just two guys on the internet. This is for internet purposes only. If you have a question about testosterone specifically, please go see uh, the local expert in your area, whether it's a testosterone clinic or your local doctor, your PCP or whatever. So we're just throwing information out
Mhm.
there that might get you curious, okay?
Right. And some
And
of it is useful, some of it's not, like they say limit alcohol consumption. What do those nerds know? Shut up, Harvard.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, unfortunately. But
but those are just the generic general things
mhm.
that will reduce testosterone or help you raise your testosterone levels. And to your point about seeing a doctor is I also looked up earlier because this is relatively new and I was kind of surprised that it is a thing that now testosterone therapies used to be considered optional. They used
They are still considered optional. Because that here's the problem with testosterone in the current medical industry. If you go to your PCP and you have low energy, low libido, low all kinds of stuff, they're going to do blood work and they are not going to test for testosterone. And they're going to go through your glucose levels, they're going to go through
unless you
your cholesterol
specifically ask
levels.
them to. Yeah.
Even if you do,
I
they may
I
not.
had to ask when we were trying to figure out why I was
Well,
chronically
I say
fatigued.
they it may not be covered on your insurance.
Yes,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that they will test for it in a generic blood panel, but I had to ask for it because they weren't
Hmm.
going to. Um, when I went in to see why, and we found out my vitamin D levels had crashed, and but they will also they'll say your levels are fine. Okay, what are they? Well, they're within normal range. Yeah, but what are they?
Yeah, and what people don't realize, the normal range is 300 units per deciliter to 1,000 units per deciliter. That is a 300% plus
Mhm.
increase from bottom normal to top normal. And if you don't know what it's like what it feels like to be 300 versus 900, give it a try.
Yeah.
Give it a try. I did the closest thing I did to any kind of replacement therapy was I'm blanking on the name of the prescription, but it works in your pituitary gland and it actually blocks estrogen a little bit. So you're encouraged to make more luteinizing hormone, which in turn increases testosterone in your testes. So uh, I went from like 320 to 450. It wasn't a grand increase, but I felt kind of decent for the first time in a long time for those that knew about my health problems from the last couple of years. I felt that halfway decent for the first time in a long time. Unfortunately, my PSAs came back high on the next test, and they stopped the treatment, which PSA prostate specific antigen, which turned out to come back super low on my last test. So we're good there. Uh, but and so they stopped the treatment, and then I started feeling like junk again. And so that little bump, 150, not even 150, 120-ish increase and I was still in the low normal, and I felt a million times better. In fact, I'm fighting with that company to let me go again because I have the blood results from my last PSA test. Uh, but yeah, it's the amount of good you feel. Now let's get back to the main topic, which is what is masculinity with
Mm.
that? Because protect, and provide. I felt good. I was getting up for work feeling refreshed. I was doing more work. I was motivated to do things. We started business stuff together that has been really slow going with time constraints, but at the same time there was a motivating factor that jumped in
Yeah.
there and it was just like you had this drive to go forward. And that drive can be work, that drive can be protect yourself, that or your loved ones, that drive can be libido, that drive can be a lot of different things. So it's just drive. We only have so many neurotransmitters in our brain, and they all do multiple things. So testosterone is what people ask, what does testosterone do? Testosterone makes everything else better. Testosterone is the strength coach of your of your endocrine system. It enhances everything you do. So they say, oh, well, you wouldn't use it as a cyclist. Remember the days of Lance Armstrong? You wouldn't use it as a cyclist because you need endurance, not big muscles. No, it enhances however you're training. That's why he was doing it because he was a better cyclist from it because he took it and he went out and rode his bike. So he got better at riding his bike. If you take it and you go to school, you learn better. If you take it and you bodybuild, you get bigger muscles. All of these things are true because it is the enhancer of everything in a male, in a biological male. If I have to define it for you, it is the sex in a species that makes smaller gametes. Okay, there you go. There's your biological definition. Uh, and I'm allowed to say that because I am a physiologist by trade, so I am expert. Uh,
Y- uh, More so than one of our Supreme Court justices.
but at the same time, yes, it enhances everything. And estrogen does a lot of that in the female body too. And in fact, high testosterone in young females is actually an indicator that higher rates of depression. So we have these chemicals for a reason. It's almost like there's a difference between males and females. But yeah, it is the universal enhancer. So if I want to do better at anything, yes, the higher level is going to be better. So it is worrying that we have less and less and less. It's more uh, alarming to me that we're encouraging less and less and less
Mm, mhm.
by using terms like toxic masculinity.
Well, that
The
was one of the reasons I looked up to see what what insurance coverage was like for testosterone therapies. And it does seem like you have to jump through more hoops because you have to be diagnosed with hypogonadism,
mhm.
the technical term
Which you have to
for
be super, super low. Even when
right.
I was in the low end, I wouldn't have been diagnosed with it.
Now, once upon a time, we were both bad insurance salesmen. we're not very good salesmen. And so I learned a long time ago, because this was a question that was asked frequently when I would go to sell an insurance plan, is I am worried about breast cancer, either just because I'm worried about it or because I have a family history of it. Is reconstructive surgery covered? A long time ago, so well over 20 years now, it was established either by regulation or law, I don't remember, that reconstructive surgery after a double mastectomy is considered medically necessary. So it
Hmm.
is part of the coverage for your breast cancer treatment.
One of the positives of the whole mental health movement, because it's covered because you are no longer quote unquote disfigured. Yeah.
Exactly. Um, and in fact, I had to, one of the more complicated clients I ever had to train is she had had a double mastectomy very young, and it was so bad that they not only took out all the breast tissue, they had to take out a lot of pec tissue.
Mm.
And so that was a very challenging, because women already have lower upper body strength proportionally, and you need it. It's part of your musculature. You need to be able to have upper body strength, and that was a toughie. That was right up there with my guy who was a 70 something year old double bypass with a pacemaker, similar but different. And not that that is a bad thing, that is a good thing, because to your point, that is part of your physical and mental health, which are tied together. But then why is it taking so bloody long to do that for men?
Hmm. Well, and
Because
I'll give a sliver of hope here because I am going to read from this book, which is Blind Spots,
mm,
Marty McCarty. He is our FDA director now. Under the Imagine the Future chapter, and number 6 is testosterone replacement for men. Many midlife men struggle with low energy, weight gain, sleep apnea, depressed mood, and sexual dysfunctions. Sometimes they discover their free testosterone level is low upon testing and told about the option of testosterone replacement therapy. And he goes on to talk about how it is beneficial for a lot of these men for their health as we age, because that's why I wanted to put that disclaimer earlier on young, healthy male, how to improve.
mhm.
We front load our health. And the answer might be the fact that we pump a crap ton of testosterone when we're young, or we should pump a crap ton of testosterone when we're young, but it dissipates with age. And some people, the longest time when we had the prostate cancer worries and everything, it was maybe that's a protective mechanism.
Mm.
But the more I'm studying the aging body, the more I'm studying physical health with aging, this is something that I have to say early in my career, I was wrong. If you are a young athlete competing in sport, do not take the stuff. You are competitive, you are cheating if you do. If you are an aging male and you struggle getting up in the morning, or you struggle with libido, or especially if you struggle with libido, because in marriages, females typically determine the sex life. If you are a low libido male, you're just setting up divorce because if she's not ready, it ain't time. Okay. So so libido's a big one. If let's see, if you are unhealthy, you're gaining weight, you can't help it. You wouldn't be able to defend yourself or your family in a fight. All of these things are happening naturally because we're getting long of tooth. Maybe we can live better till we die because we have the technology now. So that's why I think it's different in those two situations. If you're a young competing athlete, it's cheating. If you're young and your testosterone is low, try a natural method because testosterone replacement makes you dependent. But if you're aging, gosh, give it a try. You might feel good.
Especially if you are doing the things that I brought up from Harvard there about the things that will help you increase your testosterone production naturally, and it's not working. And much the same way that, we've talked before, it's been a while, but we've talked before about the various and your opinion on the various newer weight loss drugs, right?
Hmm.
Well,
I would love to
right.
see this. I would love to see this study. Testosterone replacement
Mm,
versus Ozempic, or pick whichever semaglutide you want. Control, sugar pill.
mm.
Okay. So I would love to see that study. 3 arms. I mean, we could probably do 12-month. 12-month would be fine. No other control. You don't have to have an exercise program or any of that. Just have enough participants that it washes out the individuality of those. Just those three things. One is taking test, one is taking semaglutide, and one is a control sugar pill. 12 months. IRB should be able to pass that. It's not, you're not doing anything specifically unhealthy to any group. Follow them for 12 months, enough participants that you wash out any individuality from diet and exercise, and boom, compare the three. I bet you the test group has better outcomes, maybe the same outcomes for weight loss or maybe a little less, but better outcomes for all other health markers.
And this is again, we're not medical professionals, so consult your doctor. But if you are doing your best to have healthy habits and you're still not progressing, hey, doc, this is what I'm doing. This is how I'm feeling. What are some options? You know, we've talked about that with mental health of, all right, you're doing the things, you're trying the things, but it's you're having trouble, your mental health isn't improving. Maybe you do need to see a psychiatrist along with a psychologist and vice versa, you know, or maybe what you're doing on your own or what you're doing with your friend group or family to help you isn't enough. So you need to see a professional. Same thing here. And the reason I brought up the um the reconstructive surgery aspect when it comes to breast cancer is I think to me that goes hand in hand with this idea of toxic masculinity is when you hear people say that, the people who say that, the more they talk, the more you realize, oh, you just mean masculinity. You just think any masculinity, traditional, proper, you know, if you want to define it theologically or psychologically or evolutionarily, it's masculinity.
Hmm.
And you think that's bad.
Well, yeah, there is that group. They call it benevolent misogyny if you're masculine in a good way, which is bad because misogyny is bad, right? But there, no, there are the mistaken people because they use the word toxic for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
They say toxic masculinity and then they point to examples of abuse. The problem is abuse isn't masculinity. If I am a masculine husband, I protect my wife. P, the second P, provide and protect. I protect my wife. If I am hurting my wife, I am doing the opposite of protecting my wife. So it is not masculinity, it is something different. So you can't just put toxic in front of it and then point to that example because it is the opposite. It is just call it what it is, abuse.
Mm-hmm.
That behavior you pointed out, that's abuse. Opening the door for you, masculinity. I am expending energy resources on your behalf. That is masculinity.
You've sockeyed me back to something you were saying earlier, a point I wanted to make of, oh, y'all are just horny dudes, so you talk about sex. Sex is important, people. And it's not just so there's kind of a double element to the low libido that you brought up earlier is if you don't have that energy and that drive, you know, stealing from Candace Warbox, because I love the saying, the all day foreplay, you're not going to have the energy and the drive to do the things to put your wife, girlfriend in the mood, let alone have the energy and the libido to act on it when she's ready to go. That's bad for both of you.
Hmm.
And to your point, that ultimately leads to divorce because that is a major element of, you know, long-term happiness. And also that, I mean, we have been talking the last couple of weeks about human connection. That is why we have the term intimacy. That is intimate. That is about as intimate as you can be with another human being.
Well, and let's go into the kind of the psychology, the dynamics of a relationship like that. Uh, a female is the low libido one. Everybody expects that. Okay, the kids are taking all the energy. Okay, it's dropped a little bit. Okay, we're out of the honeymoon phase. Whatever thing you want to add to that. A male starts to have the low libido, and the female has the higher libido. What is she thinking in her head?
Mm.
Am I not sexy enough? Am I getting old? Am I the, is he going to leave me for the next thing? Or all of that? Does he just not want me? Two different thoughts from from the same situation. It's just one is because one partner lost it first, and the other is because the other partner lost it first.
Which so this is where the tricky bit comes in, because this is where communication matters, because you need to be able to talk with each other about this. But a couple months ago, we played a clip from the Sex Doctors, uh, married couple, one on the physio side, one on the psych side, and they talk about sex from both angles. And that was a big part of the clip we played is, hey, it's okay to talk to each other about how you're feeling. It's okay to say, I'm not in the mood. Hey, now how you approach that can be tricky, because you don't want to be accusatory,
Hmm.
because that will, hey, I need you to do this. So no, hey, what can I do to help you feel better in these areas? What can we do to help each other in these areas? Right. And you need to, this is to a point you've brought up several times. This is where it is especially disastrous. That what do you remember the number off the top of your head of the percentage of people who say they don't have a close friend?
One out of seven, so it's like 15% ish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's bad, because it helps to role play things out in your head of, I need to talk about this with my partner, but I don't want to come across as a jerk. That's where a sounding board helps.
Yeah, well, I don't know if those people would be included in that because
Mm,
if I had a partner, I would probably report that I had a close friend because my
true.
partner is a close friend. Uh, so those one out of seven are even worse off because they don't even have the partner. Uh, but but this okay, so this is well, I'll bring another example into it. Sometimes when you get in a relationship, one of the partners will try to distance you from all other
Mm.
influences because then you don't have that. And we need that because it's the cure for our bias. It's John Stuart Mill. The cure for my bias is other people's bias. And my friend, so I'm in a relationship with my partner, and I go to my friend for advice. Well, the friend is competing for time too. So they have a bias to tell me what I need to hear, but at the same time they have a bias to tell me what they want me to hear. So yeah, it's good to have that sounding board because you get all of these different views on the same angle. And if they tell you something that increases your relationship with your partner, that takes away from their time with you. And that means it's probably true. And the same if your partner says, "Hey, you need to hang out with your friends more." You probably should be hanging out with your friends more because that's taking away from time with them.
This also, so we've been talking pretty much this whole time in the context of a relationship of a couple, and because this is a major pitfall when it comes to relationship trouble. Um, but this also affects something we talked about, the last couple of months of getting into one in the first place. Because if you don't have that energy, that drive, you are not going to be appealing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is one of the things that offended the heck out of me. That, much like this Dana White interview, this isn't new. This is just a different way of saying it. Is people who would, when he was rising in prominence, people who criticized Jordan Peterson because his audience was mostly young men.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how is that a bad thing? Again, that's back to the when you say toxic masculinity, you just mean masculinity because you don't like men and you don't want young men to be men. And
Well, it's
that
just
is
like
a
the
major part
statements.
of what he's trying to say.
Yeah, it's just like the statements. Well, how can we fix men? They should be more like women. That is the thought process in our school system right now.
Mm-hmm. And Peterson, a big part of
And
Peterson's point and his appeal was, hey, be someone worth wanting.
you know, to bring in another pop culture analogy here, this is our halftime show this year
Oh,
in one of the
jeez.
most masculine sports. In 60 Minutes is on right after the game of the week.
Yeah.
And you have Dana White on there talking about this is why the UFC gained popularity and the NFL lost popularity. This
Mm-hmm.
is our halftime show. And for those that are just listening, that's Bad Bunny. If you haven't heard of Bad Bunny, it's because he's not very good. Uh,
I hadn't heard about him until this week when
yeah, he's under I think it's Drake's record label, but Drake and Jay-Z have these deals with the NFL, and they're
Mhm.
basically throwing. That's why it's hip hop every year because they have these deals with the NFL, which they pressured them into during the BLM days, by the way.
Yep.
And so we're getting this thrown in our faces, and we need a campaign right now that says everybody's going to turn their TV off during the halftime show. If you did one that we're not going to watch the Super Bowl, you're not going to get enough people on board.
That would be very hard to get enough people to make an
Yeah.
impact. Yeah.
But you could get enough to say, you know what, we're all going to turn our TV off during the halftime show because that will take all the advertising revenue for those 30 minutes out. And if you know how much it is to run an ad on the Super Bowl show, then the NFL would be losing tens of millions of dollars.
Well, not just them, but again, I brought this up at the beginning of the year because we were complaining. A lot of people were complaining about the halftime show, and I brought up an article from someone about, yeah, you're not the audience, is because this is a major sponsor of the halftime show is Apple Music.
Hmm.
And so Apple Music, along with, Jay-Z and his label, they have this partnership with the NFL to do the halftime show to push things on their platform. Well, if all of a sudden people are turning off and it's not resulting in that boost of streams or buys for Apple Music, they're going to go, this isn't working.
Hmm. And there's two things that have been shoved down our faces in the last several years in the NFL halftime show. It is hip hop culture and femininity. So those two things. And you're watching one of the sports with the highest collision rate of
Mm-hmm.
anything except maybe MMA. So but at the same time, they're running ads with Dana White in the Ram commercial talking about being an American. Which is it, buddies? If I was Dodge, I would say I'm not running an ad during that. And Dodge is
Yeah,
going to sell more trucks. I
it's
guarantee
it,
it because
it's
men
going
buy trucks.
exactly. It's going to be counterproductive. It's
Yeah.
that's not your audience. Um, I wonder um how much this is a counter reaction to the counterculture movement. Because right now, the counterculture movement is the more traditional, conservative, masculine, because all of this has been shoved down our throats for so long. In the 60s and 70s, it was the exact opposite. It was the
Hmm.
hippie movement because of the 40s and 50s. What was felt was a stifling conservative culture, and the youngins said, "Screw that." Well, now the pendulum is swung the other way.
Which bothers me because part of my reason for even starting this channel was stopping the pendulum, period.
Mm.
Get rid of the pendulum. Let's just sit on the ground and have a nice talk, you know.
But we can't do that until we get back to the basic social compact idea of, hey, we're allowed to think different. We're allowed to be different. We're allowed to say different.
Hmm.
And we have, there is far too large, it's still a minority, but it is a significant and very loud minority of people who no, you have been accused of wrong think, and therefore your life is over. Used to be metaphorically, now literally.
Hmm. Which in the free enterprise thing, this is where like things like Jimmy Kimmel come into it, is if you're going to go on stage and say something that is, we'll use the word, although it's not strong enough, disrespectful to 100 million people in a country of 330 million people, and you lose your job because of that, that's not cancel culture. That's an employer saying, "Whoa, this is going to lose us business," and firing you. That's fine. If I say I have a gym here in this relatively conservative town, and that I hire a trainer that goes out and starts during their exercise session, starts talking about something that is not of the values of my clients out loud in public and is really hurting my business, I should fire them. Because at the end of the day, I need to keep making the money to keep the place open, right? And I know where I'm at and I know the demographic of my audience. Just like Dana White was saying there, right before the statement we played, he said it's about knowing your audience. And yes, it's 18 to 34-year-old males. Yes, we are highly masculine product, that kind of stuff. So he was actually talking about the product when the other guy brought up toxic masculinity. If my product is relatively conservative soccer moms and I have a coach that is spouting, I don't know, trans ideology, huh? How about that? And it is throwing them off, then I should probably fire that coach. That's not discrimination. That is saving my business. And that's what initially happened until something else happened with a backlash, with lawsuits coming, was probably the catalyst to getting them back on the air. But on the flips, on the other side, when we talked about what was actually cancel culture, it was stakeholders in Disney firing people like Gina Carano because they didn't like her political beliefs, irrespective of what the audience wanted.
Yeah.
That's the difference. And yeah, so if go ahead and pull us back on the track.
Well, the point and final thought from me is the whole reason I wanted to talk about this is for these political points is that this this is not something our culture is not something that is going to be fixed overnight any more than if you are morbidly obese, you are not going to be healthy overnight. It is
Mm-mm.
going to take putting one foot in front of the other and staying on track. And that's difficult. And it is going to be made all the more difficult if you don't have the physical and mental foundation that is going to let you help you keep taking those steps. Whether it is simply standing your ground and saying, no, we're not going to tolerate this, we're not going to be a part of this. um, Oh my gosh. I don't know if you saw this story, but the Des Moines, Iowa public school superintendent was just arrested because he had a deportation order from the Biden administration because he had been here for 20 years as an illegal immigrant. And yet somehow he was hired as the superintendent of the Des Moines Public Schools in deep red Iowa.
I haven't filled out a job application for a long time because I've been running my business
Uh-huh.
for 15 years. But there used to be a box you checked that said, "Are you a U.S. citizen?"
There still is, and according to a statement from, I think it was the president of the school board of Des Moines Public Schools, it was worded in a hilariously legalistic way that basically said he provided two forms of identification and said on his application he was an American citizen, but the dog, remember the Sherlock Holmes stories of the dog who didn't bark. What she didn't say was if they bothered to verify,
Hmm.
because there is a system in order to verify that those documents are authentic and
Yeah,
that
we
that
used to
person
have to
is a citizen.
provide those two things and they would scan them.
And they
I
would run
thought
it
that
through a
was to cover
verification
their own
system.
ass. Yeah.
Yep. They didn't, and it's probably because they didn't want to. But the reason I bring it up is because, hey, men of Des Moines who are sending your children to those schools, is this acceptable? What are you going to do about it? Well, you're going to sit on your butt and, wait for the Hawkeyes game to start because standing up and confrontation is difficult. Well, maybe you should boost your masculinity so that
Hmm.
you can do the things that need to be
Well,
done.
and that's, I guess my closing thought is the depressing one is there's been an effort to lower that.
Mhm.
You know, if everything goes in the same direction, then you're probably not random. And ever since the Department of Education has existed, 19, what, 79, uh, we have gotten more and more. And this is when the testosterone has started dropping, is around that exact same time. We, you talk about stress lowering testosterone. I see this in class, in my aging class, because it's very diverse, of course, because it's social sciences in a college setting. Everybody keeps talking about how everything is so stressful in the workplace in America. And I kind of piped up once and I was like, the school system's more stressful than the workplace.
Mm.
And everybody looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like, you're not stressed right now? All you do is go to school and you talk about how stressed you are. Go be an entrepreneur. Yeah, it's stressful, but it's different. You know, the school system is where it starts. And it's that Austrian model, teaching you how to be an assembly worker or a soldier. And the and they still look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, you're the source. You're the source of all this. So now talk about that from a 5-year-old, or actually more now because of the way preschool is, and they're trying to like do classroom style preschools to give your kid a head start, and that's the selling point for the preschool. So you'll take your kid there. But yeah, you're putting them in the sit down, shut up, do your work, and here's your deadlines. Here's all your deadlines every week. Do, 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 do. Keep making the widgets, keep making the widgets all the way from your most developmental years of 5 through, you know, now through college, 25 years old. If you go through grad school, your prefrontal cortex developed under the most stressful situation possible.
So tease for next time because you just reminded me of something we were talking about before we started recording that I wanted to get into, but we don't have time now, and I want to connect it to some other things, which is one of my to-do list books. I've got a stack of books I want to read, And one of the ones I really want to read is the Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to, what's the full title? The,
Hunter-Gatherer's Guide to, I have it behind. I'm gonna go get it. Hold on.
yeah. So the point of the book is hundreds of thousands of years of evolution made us this way physically, psychologically, and yet in the
To the
geological
21st century.
of in the geological blink of an eye, we are now living like this when
Hmm.
our bodies are structured to live a totally different way. And putting on my amateur psychologist hat, I think a big part of the mental health problem, especially with young men, and next week I'm going to bring back up an article I brought up a couple months ago, Red Pills Without Roots, is we are hardwired to be a certain way. And so even if you have the low testosterone and the stress and all of these other things that are, to your point, uh, purposely pushing you down, you know something's not right. You feel something's not right, even if you're not sure what and why.
Well, okay, so let's mix the hardwire with the software. Uh, the software is the all the things that are lowering that uh end results. So all the things in life that are developing the brain to be a lower testosterone, more feminine male. There's no push on the other side that is counter to the desire to want a masculine man. There's some verbiage out there. There's some, oh, you do this as a female, but it doesn't change the want for the other. And so what do we have? We have exponentially low birth rates. We have people not dating till they're 25. We have women that are going, where are all the good men at? That kind of stuff. It's just like, or so confused that they can't even express their needs. So it's not only the hardwire of the guy saying, I need to do this in my head, but I should be this way because this is how society raised me and it changed my whole chemical profile going up. But on the flip side, you have women that still want masculine men,
Mm-hmm.
but are told they don't,
Mm-hmm.
and it's breaking everybody's brains, breaking it.
Yeah, and you have some interesting numbers that I want you to bring up next time on ADHD levels
Mm.
that you talked to me about. And so there's the vital tease for tune in next time to see what that's all about and how that connects to all this. Um, so that'll be our next social episode. Next Wheel of Time-ish episode, who knows? But the
Well, I mean, we
we'll
could
see
always
what
talk
we get
about the
into.
masculine men in Wheel of Time.
Yeah, that's true. There are plenty of them. All right. Well, we will see y'all then.
All right, later.